So, last actual week um, of the course. I mean, next week's a finals week, but um, hopefully, if you're doing the final project, you can have that turned in by this weekend, and you can just be done. So far all the ones I've checked have looked fantastic. So, I think you have stand pretty good odds. But anyways, for this last week with the papers and such, we are going over what's called a view, and views are actually um, I think they're really pretty cool. Um, and they can actually be like a huge time slash lifesaver. So we're going to kind of go over a couple of those, talk about what they are because they can be a little weird because as we'll discuss, they're basically like tables, but they aren't in a way. I like to think about it as just like a select statement that is a table. So anyways, let's create a view actually. So I'm actually going to create one. So let's say that we wanted um like a list of, let's say we wanted, what's a good example here? Let's say we want a view that has all the film actors because we've done this a few times in the past. So we want the film with actor and category. Let's say film with category and actor, and that's the way. Because we've done this query a couple of times, and it's a little bit longer. So let's just write that query. So we're going to select. Let's just start with everything from film F. We're going to left join it to make sure that we don't leave out any films. On film ID is equal to the film actor ID. And then we're going to left join that with actor on FA dot actor ID is equal to a dot actor ID. All right, so now we have our film and our actor. So I'm actually going to go ahead and run this, and we can get a look at some of the columns that are in here, so we know what we want to include in our view, which is important. So let's include the film ID, and I like including a lot of the IDs in the view because you might need them, because we'll talk about some use cases for this view here as soon as we get it. And I know right now we're actually just creating a select statement, which is actually how we create the view itself. So let's get the title. Let's get the description. Basically, I want to get everything that could be useful. So let's get the release year. Let's get the rental rate. Actually, this is just the purpose of getting the actor. So let's not worry too much about all that. So let's leave it right there. Okay. Let's get the rating. And then we want to get the actor ID. And then first name and last name. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to call this actor first and actor last. And for the sake of being thorough, I'll just add a name on there so it's not ambiguous. All right. So we have our actor. The last thing we want to do is add our category. And so we're going to do an inner join from to category. And let's do a left join. Just, I'm not sure if there's any movies that don't have a category, but we want to be sure. So on F. And I think we need to do film category. On F dot film ID is equal to FC. And then finally we get to our category. make sure we run here. There we go. So now we have that. We just need to add our category. So let's put it up here. And our category ID. As category name. All right. So now we might have more than one record in here, and that's fine. But we have a query that we might use frequently. you know, um, and I guess a good example of this is with your final projects is if there's ever a time, because one of the best use cases for Vue is for implementing like ETLs or interfacing with an application, APIs. And so we might want just to be able to deliver this. Like, so you can imagine if we're running a website like IMDb, rather than have to write this query every time, we could save this because we know we're using it a lot to display information, to look for information. We want to use this a lot without having to necessarily see this code every time. So what we can do is we can take this select statement and we can actually turn it directly into a view. So it's pretty simple. We just say create view and we can give it a name. So I'm going to say, call this film category actor as, and that's it. We can run it and we created our view. Now what's cool is from this point on, instead of having to write that whole thing, the equivalent is just select everything from film category actor. And voila. There we go. Same set of information, just one's a lot easier to get at. So pretty easy to create them. You just write create view, the name of the view as, and then you write your select statement. And now what this does is it acts like a table. So we could actually join this. We can really do whatever we want with it, which is really nice because a lot of the work is already done for us. So a lot of times views are created as utility just because, if we are constantly writing this query, a view is nice because you can kind of save that step. Additionally, views are used for, like I said, APIs. So we could send this instead of having to write this again and again and again. We can just say, hey, front end developer, this is the data you're going to need. So I'm going to create a view for that. And in fact, a lot of times you could even create the view as like if we were IMDb, we could call it a film list view, something along those lines. So that way, I as the front end developer or back end developer, I don't need to necessarily worry about. I don't need to know if the film actor table is related to this one. All I need to know is that everything I need is pre-connected in the film list view. And I can get all of my films, all of my actors, and the categories they're in right from there. So it's pretty handy. Pretty handy. And the last thing that's really handy about them is that they are also useful for security. So I think I put this in the announcement, but just in case you didn't catch it, you can imagine if we had like a table that had social security information. Well, rather than give, like, let's say you had someone who needed to do analytics for a call center, but you don't necessarily want them to be able to see social security numbers. You can create a view that only gives them access to the relevant information they need, and then they can do their work. Also, what's cool is you can, depending on the view and how the view is created, you can actually update through this view. So I'm going to look at this Penelope Guinness, who is actor ID 1. So I'm going to say update film category actor. I'm going to set actor first name equal to, let's just say Penelope 1, where actor ID is equal to 1. So I'm going to try to run this up, and this one actually isn't going to let me because it says the target table film category actor of the update is not updatable. Some updates are updatable, which means that you can actually run an update statement against it, which is pretty cool. The usefulness of that, I think, is a stretch, but it is nice that sometimes that's an option. All right. Does anyone have any questions to that point? Okay. All right. So again, these views are pretty self-explanatory. Nothing too crazy going on there. But yeah. All right. Let's see. I was gonna go over some of these. So you guys still able to hear me okay?
Yeah.
Hopefully you don't hear my child crying in the background. We have a newborn.
Newborn crying is so cute, though.
It was at first, and then after a while, it's just crying. But yeah, it is fun. Okay, so as far as the exercises, this one's pretty easy. First one, it just says create a view definition that can be used by the following query to generate the given results. So basically you just write the query just like we did, and put it in there. So they actually give you the query, so you just have to actually create you'll have to create the film category actor, which, surprise, surprise, we just kind of did a little bit. So there's that one, which is pretty much what we did. And let's actually test that. So we just need it where the last name is equal to Fawcett. For actor last name is equal to Fawcett. And there we go. So yeah, there's exercise 1. Exercise 2, the film rental company manager would like to have a report that includes the name of every country along with the total payments for all customers who live in each country. Generate a view definition that queries the country table and uses a scalar subquery to calculate a value for a column named total payments. So let's go ahead and let's actually walk through that one here real quick. And this one really is more an exercise in writing a query than it is creating the view, because creating the view is really pretty simple. I think they're just trying to give you some good use cases. Reports are one of those. If there's a report you run constantly, views are amazing because they don't take up additional space like a table would. They're just really nice and easy, and they save you a lot of work because you can go through all the work of writing the query once, and then it kind of is there. All right, so we need every country along with the total payments for all customers who live in that country. So let's start off with the country. There's our country. And next, we're probably going to want to go to the name of every country. So let's left join this with, and I think the next one is store. Nope. Oh, the customers who live in there. So we're going to have to go all the way from there to address, I believe. City, then to address. This one's going to be a fun one. Okay, so in this case where we just want every country, I'm actually going to do an inner join. So we'll only see countries where customers currently live, which I think makes sense. I honestly like take it either way, but so I'm going to inner join this against the city table. I always like to make sure I can keep running. So I'll run it just to make sure it works. And then we're going to inner join that against address A. And then we're going to inner join that with customer. You know what? I really should. No really good abbreviation for that one. All right, let's go ahead and run this, make sure we're working up. And now we have an unknown customer ID right here. So that means that we need to go about this a little differently. So we're going to join this on address ID. So if we go look in customer, we have an address ID. So we need to go the other, use that column because that's our foreign key. And there we go. So now we're back and working. All right, so now we have our customer ID. So now we can actually go into our payment table. In here we have a payment ID, or customer ID, sorry. So let's inner join that with payment P on C dot customer ID is equal to P dot customer ID. All right, so now we have a bunch of data. Let me just make sure. Yep, because we want it for all the customers who live in that country. So now we have all of the countries with customers in them who have made payments, which is important. So we're only going to see the countries who have customers who have made payments. All right. And so now what we need is we need a scalar subquery to calculate the value for a column named total payments. Now, technically, we could just do a group by here, but it asks specifically for a scalar subquery. And the scalar subquery is a little different. So what we're going to do is we're going to say select. Let's see. Well, let's do the group by way, and then we'll do the subquery way. So let's say we want to group by country, and we want the sum p dot amount there we go. So that's the easy way with a group by, which we could then save as the view. But it asks specifically for a scalar subquery. And a scalar subquery is one that returns exactly one column and one row. So basically a single value. And so what we're going to do is we're actually going to just put that right in. And like I said, there's a bunch of different ways we can go about this because we're already here on payment. So what we can do is instead of summing this, we can say, let's see, how would we go about this? This is kind of a weird one. Generate a view that queries the country table and uses a scalar subquery to calculate a value for a column named total payments. Okay. So we're going to select either way, we're going to have a group by. And so I'm going to make an executive decision that I'm going to edit that question because I just don't like it because it's just messy. And there's no reason to teach bad habits because ultimately you're going to need a sum anyways. So I think we're going to want this. I mean, the roundabout ways you would basically write this query and then connect country to it. But yeah, I'll adjust that because I just don't like that at all. So we'll just say P dot amount as total payments, and then we group by country. There we go. There's all of our countries with their payments lifetime. Does anyone have any questions on that one? That one made pretty good sense. All right. So this next one, we're going to use our little tricks that we learned when we learned about case statements to get a count of our little ratings here. And it says, let's see. So we want to write a view that displays the following result set when there's a column name for each rating when you use the following query. So we're going to create a view called rating distribution. And we should display the names in uppercase letters. Got it. Okay, so basically if we select uppercase, it'll show us in uppercase. If we select lowercase, it will show us. So the column name should display in uppercase letters. So basically we want it to match. So if we use a lowercase letter for one or more column names in the select list, it's going to do this. So this one's actually a little bit tricky. So let's go ahead and try this. So we're going to say select, and we want, I think this is from the film. Yeah, the number of films with a specific rating. So we're going to go film dot, and this will all be in there. So we're just going to say rating. And really, we're not going to do that. We're going to say case when rating is equal to G, then film ID and remember, this is our little hack to get our thing here. And remember, we're going to build a view, and it's going to give us pretty much everything. So let's start with that point. So we're going to select it as G. We're going to to just repeat this process for all of the different ratings here. $13, and then we have R. And then we have NC17. There we go. So this is our distribution. All right. When we select everything from here, we should be, so let's create our view. We're going to create view, rating distribution as, and then we're going to go ahead and run our select. And basically this just creates the view. So at this point now we can select everything from rating distribution, and we get the results just like we have here. Now, the tricky part now is this next little bit, which is a little confusing. So basically, if we select a specific column from that view, depending on the case of the column, we want to return a different set of column names, which is a little tricky. Sorry, I have a frog in my throat. Okay. So let's take a look here. Sorry, excuse me one second. Oh, sorry about that. I had to get a quick drink. All right, so we need to have this change based on our what we select here. So how we're going to do that comes down to a couple different things. We have a couple different options. But let's try a couple here. Let me see if I can find a good resource. Okay, I can't find a resource for it. So a couple different options we have here. And let's see if we can clear this up. So what we can do is we can actually just duplicate these and change the case of them. Whoops. SG, because if we select everything from it right now, we get the column names in uppercase. Let me just make sure I'm reading this correctly here. When we use a lowercase letter for one or more of the column names in the select list like this, the column name should display in lowercase letters. Alternatively, when you use an uppercase letter for one or more of the column names in the select list like this, the column name should display in uppercase. Perfect. So let's let's go ahead and do this. So I think the easiest way is when we, now what we can do is we can simply give two of them. Like so. We'd want to duplicate this across the board, but the only problem is then we get like this. Let's say create or replace view. And we need to fix our hastiness here. There we go. And it's still complaining about it. So let's see if we can figure out how to do this. So let's go to the reading. It is on chapter 14, I believe.
It's saying that the cases that are distinct are not distinct, so it's getting frustrated.
Yes. Okay. So let's see, because I believe it's called with the check option. Nope. Let's see. Okay, well, let's just go through this because I actually don't remember this one. Adding complexity, joining partition data, yes. Updatable views. Talked about inserting. Nothing too crazy there. Pull out the handy dandy book here real quick. See what we got. Different data application, data security. Like I said, I don't remember reading this in the book. Yeah, okay, well, I guess we're going to have to turn to Google because now I'm actually pretty curious how this works.
It's treating both the G's as if they're the same line somehow.
Yeah, and that's what I'm trying to figure out how to make it conditional it without a system without using a variable.
Can you put an else instead of each of those cases that says else rating equals lowercase g? So it's, does that make sense?
Yeah, like right here, like else.
Yeah.
The only thing is like we have to count them, so we want the same distribution. We just want really what's changing is the name of the column, which is what's kind of interesting.
You could try putting single quotes, making it a character that's for the as statement. And
Yeah, let's try that. I don't think we can try that. Oh, yeah, it still doesn't like that. I've actually never, I've seen this done with like a variable, but I've never seen it done with a view. View. The view with like variable column, which is really interesting. Yeah, that is really interesting. I've not come across this one before. The column names should display in uppercase. Oh, you know what it might be? Okay, I think I may know. I think it's the way we're doing our thing. So if I do, let's try it like this, because I think select distinct. From film. They're uppercase. Well, that is interesting. I actually, this one stumped me just a little bit. Let me scroll onward here because I believe the rating is in the numerator type. Yeah, that one's a little tricky.
Maybe if you did non-distinct, I don't.
No, because it's actually complaining about the column name, which makes sense. This question's really weird. Because it doesn't like this unless we trying to think if there's a hack to this. A really odd use case here. So let's try, let me reset this here real quick. We get what we want there, rating distribution. If I wanted to return a specific rating as the title, which is really odd. Unless each one's a row. Let me think here for a minute. If we have a okay, I might have it here. Well, but that still doesn't make sense because where I'm really confused. There's a couple ways to hack this, but when they select everything from the view, it only returns the one row. Because there would be a way to hack this to where you could add another like kind of another row with some additional data and it would change it. The only other thing I'm thinking, well, but it's still the column headers. Yeah, that is super weird. Anyways, yeah. Well, I can't solve it. I'll keep messing around with that offline, or if we have extra time at the end. But that was kind of weird. So we'll move on because, I mean, really, it's kind of a weird use case, anyways. Why you'd care if the thing's uppercase or lowercase. All right. So next, we write a non-updatable actor films by year view that displays the following ordered set. I'm actually going to skip this one because it's pretty much the same thing we've done before. So I'm going to skip question 4, leave that one to you guys. But question 5, we're going to do this one. So basically what we're going to do is we're going to create a rental stats view that's going to return the rating column and the rent ratio column by dividing the number of rentals by the inventory count column. So basically what we're trying to decide is how many rentals per inventory is there, which makes sense. So like, for example, if we end up with, 4 rentals for every two two movies that we have on hand. Basically would give us a ratio of like 4 or 2, sorry. So let's build this. So let's go ahead and we will write our thing here. So we're going to say select. First, we want to get the number of oh, and we're doing this all by our rating. So let's get our let's start off by getting the number of rentals that we have for every rating. So let's get f dot rating from film f, and we're going to let's left join this with, and we need it for inventory. What does inventory look like? Inventory has a film ID, which is perfect. We can just go inventory I on f dot film ID is equal to I dot film ID. And then we're going to left join. Actually, I think that's all we need. Let's start with that. So we have our rating, and then what we're going to do is we're going to get a count of, actually we need our rentals. Sorry, we need how many rentals we have. So let's check our, I believe rental has film ID, has inventory in it. Yes. So now we can just go straight from here. Let's say left join our rental table on I dot inventory ID is equal to R dot inventory ID. All right, let's make sure we work here. There we go. So now we're going to add our counts. So we're going to start aggregating our data. So we want the count of all of our inventory. So I'm going to say I dot inventory ID. Select distinct as this one's inventory count. And so it makes sense. We're going to get our count of R dot rental ID num rentals. All right, and then we need our group by. Dot rating. And there we can see our list of stuff. Now, what it looks like though is that we want, because if I'm looking at this result set, it's not just necessarily by the rating because they want 130 rows. So I'm guessing what we want is rather than necessarily group it by our rating, we just want to display the rating, but still have it be organized by our inventory. So let's see here. I'm guessing that would be, let's see how many, let's try to reverse engineer this. So if we select the count, because do they want this select count from film? Okay, there's too many films. Number of rentals. Oh, and this one, it has a film stats view of chapter 4. So let's actually go there. Chapter 14. That's our missing puzzle piece. Film stats. Okay, here it is. So yes, they do base that on by dividing the rent ratio column by dividing the number of rentals by the inventory count. So if I'm looking at this in the book, the inventory count is the total count of inventory from film. So theoretically, if I were to take out our group by, I think we should end up with 130 of our inventory count. No. Film rating, and then they select. Let's see here.
It looks like somehow you're doing a natural join.
Should theoretically, if we select the count from inventory, yeah, I am not sure where they're getting 130 from. Let me read through this and see if they're filtering out anything. Because realistically, they select, and I'm just going to copy a couple, the portion of this that we need. They select, which I might as well just keep it here. F film ID. F title. F description and F rating from film. Certainly is more than 130. So I honestly do not know. Oh, and you know where we are on the right track actually. Just realized that this 130 is where the rent ratio is greater than 4. So we were actually on the right track. Just a little hiccup. So anyways, let's try this again. We're going to do it our way because their way is a little different. Okay. So here we are again after a slight detour with more rows. Than what we want. So now, but the key is because we want to get to the point where we have basically every film in addition to, but we don't want to display the film ID because really this would be pretty easy if we just added like the film ID here. Film ID, and then we added F rating. Really, this is probably the preferred method. The clean way is to do something like this, and then we could order it by 2, 3. And then what we would do is we would do our math. So instead of actually getting the number of rentals and all this, well, we can keep both, but we're going to take the number of rentals and we're going to divide it by the number of inventory. So I'm going to do this way, and then I'll do it the other way with the join, or not with the join, with the subquery, so we can see both. And I'm going to call this as rent ratio. All right, so now we have some rent ratios going on here. And so then for the last step, what I'm going to do is I'm going to say having a rent. Let's just put it in here. greater than 4.0. So this is not the way that they necessarily wanted you to solve it, but it returns 130 rows, and this is the clean way. Right, so this is what I would consider to be the sophisticated way. So at this point, I would say create view rental stats, and I'm going to call it proper because, well, I'm a little disappointed sometimes that they don't just do it this way. But anyways, this would be the proper way, which is basically using our joins, because this is actually more efficient. It's more efficient to use the joins and then group it to get our rent ratio. And ultimately the result's the same. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you how they in the book propose you do it, which is really bizarre to me, but it will all be good. So basically what they're going to do is they're going to use a bunch of correlated subqueries. So for example, for the number of rentals, instead of joining to the rental table, I'm going to select the count of everything from rental where film ID is equal to f.film ID. And then for the inventory count, I'm going to do the same thing, another subquery, which subqueries are expensive. There's that. So now we have those two. And then to get our big final count here, we would put subquery 1 and subquery 2. And technically we're not supposed to show the actual number of rentals in an inventory count, but I like to show them because it just helps make sense of things. And you can see how much longer that took. So compared to our previous 0.016 seconds and a lot less to fetch, this instead took basically all inclusive over 3 seconds. So you can see that it's that's why I guess I'm a little confused as to why they're jumping through these hoops in the book when this one's so much more efficient. But anyways, that's why I'm going to show you both. And so now we just need to, this is our view. So I'm going to say create or replace view rental stats. And I'm going to call this slow. Temporarily take out these. So there it is. And now we can appease them by saying select everything from rental stats where rent ratio is greater than 4. Order by rating. Rental stats. Slow. You can see that just takes a long time to run compared to our rental stats proper. So if I want to just change this, we'll just kind of have a little fun here. Pretty much instantaneous and slow. Like I have enough time to actually stop and think, which means, I mean, even though it's not a huge deal, it's really about the slowness of, oh, and I did something wrong here. Let's take a look. I do this backwards. Num rentals, dividing the number of rentals by the inventory count column found there, which we should have done. Oh, I see. Because our rentals are a little different. So this is again another reason just to do the join. Because if we take a look at our inventory table, as of right now, we're selecting everything from inventory where the film ID is equal, but really we need inventory and rental connected. So we have to do a join here anyways, which is going to just make this that much worse, because we only want the number of inventories that have been rented, if that makes sense. So we're going to inner join on rental on, and this would be rental ID is equal to I'll just use the full name for now. Rental ID. Okay. So let's try this again. See if we get better ratios this time. Okay, so this time we didn't get anything. So let's think on this. We're selecting the count of everything from inventory, which makes sense because we're getting the total number of inventory records. We want that where, oh, and I did rental ID. Shoot, that is our problem. We want inventory ID. That is the whole point of this. There we go. And I'm going to take out these two guys here. Let's try this again. Inventory ID. So we need to say inventory ID. There we go. And now we'll wait for it to run. And those ratios still look a little off. Yes, they do. So let's take a look here. So we're inner joining on inventory to rental where the film ID is equal to the film ID. And I wonder if it's using the wrong film ID here. Inventory dot film ID is equal to f dot film ID. Okay, so we're getting the count from, we want the total inventory. Makes sense. You can see how much more complicated this is. Let's see. Okay, so we got the count from rental, which is pretty straightforward. And we divide the number of rentals, which is the first one, by, got it. Okay, so I'm thinking about this backwards. So we want this just to be the other way around. So let's go like this. We want the rentals, the num rentals is the denominator, and we want the rentals to be linked up, but the inventory is just the inventory. Yes, I believe that's correct. Let's try this again. I could just look in the book and see how they're doing it, but there we go. Okay, problem solved. And there we go. 130 rows. Perfect. All right, so that is question 5, which was, if you follow the book, more complicated than if you just approach it yourself. Again, I will take either answer. Does anyone have any questions about that one in particular? or any of the exercises we did just now?
I just put something in the chat for number 3. I think it was number 3 that we were having a question about.
Oh, perfect. Yeah, let me pull that up. The count distinct case when rating equals G, then fill my D. Yeah, so that actually is going to end up with the same result. Because really what we want is this to change. The actual column header. You know, because I could put you know, like to add our when here, when rating is equal to a lowercase g. Because really all this is just checking is for a lowercase g in the data itself. At the end of the day, we're still going to have the same column header, if that makes sense. Which is why I'm really confused about the question, or the question they want, because we can create views, we can create parameters that we can pass in there, but honestly, it's just a really bizarre ask. I've never seen it done before, and I don't think I ever see a use case for it. So it's just really interesting that they like what they're trying to do. Basically, change the column name. It's like changing the column name based on what you're selecting from it, if that makes sense.
Okay.
Which is really odd. Yeah, because really like what we want is, so like I select everything from, and what confused me is like they want us to be able to do this and get one row. But then, for example, like I can say select G from rating distribution. What do you know? It actually just works by default. So that was a lot of fuss over nothing. Because I think we can take this out. So if I select G from, I've just never seen that documented anywhere, to be honest.
It works as, it doesn't work as alias, but it works when you put it in this, just as a single select. I wonder why that is.
Yeah, and that's because when we do this, like if I say as, like for example, if I put this as an uppercase, it's going to re-uppercase it because we're creating a new alias. When we do it from a view, this basically becomes our new column name. So for example, if I were to actually describe rating distribution, you'll notice that it actually has the names of those fields. Just like if I were to describe customer, you know, first name, last name, so on and so forth. What's interesting, and I kind of want to test this on a non-view now because I've actually never seen this before. If I select first name from customer, I get first name lowercase. If I select first name, so I guess what's confusing, I don't know why they added that because that is default behavior. And even myself, I've never seen that documented anywhere, to be honest. Kind of weird. So anyways, big solve is if you type the column name when you select in caps, it's going to return it in caps. So just as a little, I guess, trial and error here, if I do it like this, let's see if that even works. Yes. Okay. We can just camel case this all the way across however we want. And why does NC 17? Which one doesn't? Okay, for some reason it doesn't like that one. I'm not sure why. But anyways, come to find out, it just does it for you. So guess I should have tried that one off the bat. So anyways, yeah, we had it right the whole time. Basically just do it and it will do it automatically for you. Which is interesting. I think how they wrote that is I think they want you to try it. And I think what threw me up is this. The column name should display in lowercase letters. And the keyword being should. And when really they should change this to will. If that makes sense, to make it look like it's because I get they might be trying to get you to explore and say like, oh, you know, you can have it return because then it's like an interesting tidbit versus something you need to take action upon, if that makes sense. All right, well, problem solved. That's awesome. Cool. I actually didn't know that. That's a first for me because normally I just write, I just write the query. Because most of the time I'm not too concerned with case as far as column names. That's why I thought it's kind of a weird, I'm like, it's a weird ask. But really, I think what they're trying to get at is it's just an interesting tidbit, which it is. So interesting. All right. Any other questions about views? The book will go over and more examples of like how to hide like email addresses and so on and so forth. But that's all pretty self-explanatory. I wanted to cover the exercises for the above mentioned reasons because I kind of reviewed them before and realized that some of those were a little weird. So I just want to go through those. So hopefully that helps and you guys can have a little bit easier last week of the term. Of you that are in here, do any of you guys need help with your final projects, or if you're just taking the final, that's fine too. Either way works. All right, pretty quiet. So
I can maybe use a nudge in the right direction as far as organizing my stuff.
Yeah, for sure. Let's see. So what I would do is I would just create a folder. So I'm just going to make a new folder. So what I would do is I would just make a folder, and basically the deliverables, I would have them be, and let's take a look here. Because I have one that someone submitted and I won't show their name, but I just want to show how it looked.
Do we need UI elements for every table action, or do we just need SQL queries for every table CRUD action?
Yeah, you don't need, basically like my rule of thumb is like everything you use to create your test data, because like, basically every table's got to have some data in it. So you can test it. So what I would say is have a SQL file that you keep all of like your test inserts with, if that makes sense. And here's a good example. So this is a final project submission. That's, they kind of like a layout as far as the files go is whatever, whatever works for you. But they have their PowerPoint that's kind of there, but inside this folder, they have the SQL that they use to create their database. They have the SQL they use to seed their database, which is insert all their test data. And then they have their CRUD tests. And so really, to me, if you insert the the file that it takes to create your database, which, could be automatically generated if you did it from the ERD, forward engineered it. And then you obviously need to put some data in there. So I would say upload these two, because that gives you create and create statements pretty much across the board, quite a bit. In fact, probably more than what's required. And then for your CRUD test cases, I would say just build your UI map of a user flow. Like, so basically like the bulk. So like, for example, if I'm doing a web store, the user experience should be, okay, I am browsing products. I add a product to my cart. I check out and do the whole order thing, right? That to me would be like the flow you would want to show. And you would just need to do your UI for that, and then have CRUD tests for each one of those UI maps. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Oh, and so that's kind of what I would submit. So basically, and you can kind of do it however. I would say just kind of like submit everything. So like if this was mine, I would just come here, compress this into a zip, and upload this whole thing.
Okay.
And if you want to, so like if it were me doing it, what I would do is I would have a folder called like deliverables. And again, this is just me. You can do it however you want, because I can just sort through it. So you could either put so again, like if this was gonna be mine, maybe I put my deliverables in the deliverables folder, or I could just put my deliverables here. So like, part of the deliverables is an ER diagram, our PowerPoint, and our CRUD tests. Because let's say my UI maps in the PowerPoint. Most people put their UI map in the PowerPoint. So I would kind of put my deliverables in the root folder, and then everything else, like my initial database, that kind of stuff. Basically anything that I wanted to throw in extra, like just to show my work, I would go ahead and just throw in like a resources folder and submit it. Does that answer the question?
Yeah.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Yep. Good question.
So how picky on the ERD are you going to be?
I'm not too picky, really, as long as it makes sense for what the project is. Because I know one of the rubric items is like it's got to be in like third normal form. I'm not too picky about that, because to me it's a work in progress. I mean, obviously if it's like really if it's really just like a mess, like I might dock a few points, but it would have to be pretty messy. And like I said, as long as it makes sense for the project, I go with it. Even if like I see areas for improvement, I don't usually dock for that, as long as it, like, oh, it makes sense. So it's, as long as it's not like, a disaster, and it and it has all the requirements as far as like the number of tables, you're golden.
Okay.
Yep. And and realistically, like where it's a little later, like if it's not quite there, because where the ERD is kind of like the root of it, as a little hint, like when you're doing your PowerPoint, I know I've mentioned this before, I really like to, not that it's not in the list of things to do, but I would recommend, if there's something that you wish you would have done, or you messed up on or whatever, I would dedicate a portion of the PowerPoint, whether it's a slide or two, to if I was doing this all over from scratch, knowing what I know now, this is what I would have done different, sort of, so to speak. And so that way, because as I'm going through these, if I see like an area where I'm like, oh, like this isn't necessarily up, I understand that we're building a ship as we're flying it, so to speak. So we're building the plane as we fly it. So I understand there's going to be some like things to it that might be a little quirky, because at this point you can't really go back and change your whole model and have it all flow through your CRUD test without basically redoing it all, or having to redo a bulk of it. So what I would say is, if there are some points of your project where you feel like, oh, like this, I'm a little worried about this, but fixing it now is way past beyond what's doable, I would say just dedicate some time to it in your PowerPoint and not only acknowledge it, but maybe explain how to fix it. And when I see that, I'll give a lot of leeway.
Okay.
All right. Any other questions? All right. Well, thank you guys for being here on the last one. Best of luck. I'll be sending out some announcements and communication still. So if you need something, feel free to hit me up on Teams. But yeah, thanks for being here for the last meeting, and hope you guys have a great holiday break. And yeah, best of luck.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thanks.
thank you.